I believe in the concept of individual responsibility. That means that if I do something wrong, you don't get punished. And if you do something wrong, I don't get punished. We take responsibility for our individual actions. And if in a criminal context we're accused of crime, the state has to prove my individual responsibility beyond a reasonable doubt, and I have the right to the presumption of innocence, and I have the right, in cases of serious crime, to a jury. That all seems fairly fundamental. It used to be the law in Canada. But now we've developed the whole concept of collective guilt. We developed this in the context of the Second World War and crimes against humanity and war crimes. Now all of a sudden, people like Michael Seifert are responsible for crimes committed by an organization they might have been forced to be a member of, and which organization is not proven to commit individual crimes but develops a general reputation for which the courts take sort of judicial notice. That was the case with the Nuremberg trials and the SS and the SD and a few other organizations of the government of Germany at that time. Today, we use it against the Revolutionary Guard, and I'm looking at a copy of the National Post of today, June the 8th, Monday, June the 8th, and it says, court upholds deportation of ex-Revolutionary Guard. The branding of the Guard, that is the Revolutionary Guard in Iran, as an organization involved in crimes against humanity effectively makes its leadership suspected war criminals under Canadian law. Well, there's a lot of loaded terms there. They're not just suspected, they're deemed war criminals. And it makes them, no matter how involved they are in the organization, and no matter what they did, they might be completely innocent of anything, but because they were members of this group deemed to be involved in war crimes. And in this case, a Mr. Anari admitted that he was a part-time member of the Guard while studying at university. Well, who at university hasn't been involved in some organizations? This sounds so much like McCarthyism. You know, you went to university and you were associated with people who were members of the Communist Party. But, however, now we have McCarthyism of the left. And what they do, and what they're doing in this case, is disgracing, in my opinion, the whole concept of individual responsibility and the very important concepts of fundamental justice that have been the inherent nature of our British common law. The Canadian government is complicit in all this because it makes them popular with certain ethnic groups to vilify other groups. And that's how we developed some of our anti-discrimination laws. But the Canadian government was represented in its next morning comment after the deportation of Mr. Anari by someone called Faith St. John, spokeswoman, of course should be a spokeswoman, for the Canada Border Services Agency. Mr. Anari was removed, she said. He was an admitted member of the Revolutionary Guard in Iran and deemed inadmissible into Canada for committing crimes against humanity. Well, what crimes against humanity did he commit? Was there any evidence that he did anything personally to anyone? Not necessary. The Canadian government, in its omnipotent and superior attitude towards the world and other organizations, has deemed the Revolutionary Guard to be criminals of one kind or another. War crimes, crimes against humanity, vague crimes that require no proof, that require presumptions. And of course, because it's an Immigration Act procedure, very much like Mr. Seifert, he's not entitled to a jury, he's not entitled to the presumption of innocence, and he's not entitled to proof beyond a reasonable doubt. All these things are taken away, and because it's done to some individual from Iran for whom there'll be very little sympathy, and as it was to Michael Seifert, who was from Germany and was on the wrong side in the Second World War, caught between the Russian army and the German army, we don't have much sympathy for people like that. But the problem is we create a legal precedent that takes away the rights of all of us. And soon, of course, there will be domestically deemed criminal organizations, which they start with the Hells Angels, I mentioned this before, and then they'll move to other organizations that aren't members of the Liberal Party, the Conservative Party, or the NDP. Gradually, every political idea that is unacceptable to the elite of Canada will become deemed to be criminal organizations. That's what happens in a totalitarian system which is based upon group responsibility, not individual responsibility. These are dangerous trends in Canadian law. that I strongly urge you to think about, write to your Member of Parliament about, and when obviously this doesn't change in Canada, that's a good reason, a very good reason. We have to free the West.